Once upon a time, in a land where the mountains cradled the sky and the rivers wove silver threads through the valleys, there lived a dwarf named Balin. He was a stout little fellow, no taller than a young sapling, with a beard like russet leaves and eyes that twinkled like the embers of a cozy fire. Balin made his home in the hollow hills, a gentle range of slopes and burrows where the earth hummed with quiet magic. His house was a snug hollow carved into a hillside, its door painted green and its windows framed with moss, warmed by a hearth that glowed with a golden light. Inside, shelves brimmed with jars of herbs and polished stones, and a kettle bubbled softly, filling the air with the scent of cinnamon and sage. Balin was a tinker by trade, crafting tiny wonders from bits of metal and wood, music boxes that sang lullabies, lanterns that flickered like stars. But his heart held a secret wish, a longing to find a treasure his grandfather had spoken of, lost to the hills long ago. The hollow hills were a place of gentle beauty, their slopes blanketed with clover and dotted with flowers that glowed faintly at dusk. Rabbits hopped through the grass, their fur dusted with sparkles, and fireflies danced above the streams, casting a shimmer over the water. The dwarves who lived there were a kind folk, their burrows scattered like jewels across the hills, and they loved Balin for his warm smile and clever hands. Yet the hills held whispers of older days, when a great treasure, a crystal said to hold the light of the mountains, had shone beneath the earth, keeping the land alive with its glow. Balin's grandfather, a tinker before him, had told tales of it, his voice soft as he worked by the fire, saying it was hidden deep in the hills, guarded by the spirits of stone and root. Now that light was dim, the flowers bloomed less brightly, and Balin felt a quiet ache, a call to find what had been lost. One crisp evening, as the sky turned a deep indigo and the first stars peeked through, Balin sat by his hearth, a mug of spiced tea warming his hands. The fire crackled gently, its shadows playing across the walls, and he was mending a music box, its tune a soft chime that filled the hollow with peace. A tapping came at his door, light as a pebble rolling downhill, and he set his work aside, curious. Opening it, he found a tiny creature, a mole, its fur black as coal, its eyes like polished beads, wearing a vest of woven grass. It carried a twig in its paws, leaning on it like a staff, and though it did not speak, Balin felt a tug at his heart, a sense that it bore a message. He knelt, his beard brushing the floor, and the mole stepped closer, leaving faint paw prints of dust on the stone. The air around it shimmered faintly, a hint of the hill's old magic, and Balin's ember eyes widened with wonder. The night grew quieter, the wind hushing itself outside, and Balin invited the mole in with a sweep of his hand. It shuffled to the hearth, warming its little body by the fire, and he watched it with a growing sense of purpose. He fetched a thimble of water and a crumb of bread, setting them before the mole, and as it nibbled, the firelight seemed to brighten, as if it sensed a tale beginning. The mole turned its bead-like eyes to him, and Balin felt a story unfold in the silence, a whisper of a fading crystal, a buried glow, a journey for someone small but brave. His life, so steady and simple until now, was about to shift, though he did not yet know how far it would take him. Outside, the hills murmured his name, their voices soft and encouraging, and as the mole settled by the hearth, Balin's heart stirred, ready to follow where the hollow hills might lead, into a gentle adventure woven with magic and the promise of light. The fire in Balin's hollow burned low and steady as the night deepened over the hollow hills, its golden light casting a warm glow across the mole's black fur. The tiny creature nibbled the last of its crumb, its bead-like eyes glinting with a quiet knowing, and Balin sat across from it, his russet beard tucked into his lap, his mug of tea cooling in his hands. The music box lay unfinished on the table, its chimes silent now, and the air held a stillness that felt like the hills themselves were listening. The mole tapped its twig staff once against the stone floor, a soft sound that echoed in Balin's chest, and though no words passed between them, he understood. This visitor was no chance guest, but a guide sent by the earth, a whisper of the treasure his grandfather had spoken of. The dwarf's ember eyes flickered with a mix of wonder and resolve, and he knew the time had come to seek the crystal that glowed beneath the hills. Morning arrived with a gentle blush, the sky softening to a pale rose as mist curled around the slopes like a sleepy breath. Balin rose early, his stout form moving quietly through the hollow as he packed a small satchel, bread wrapped in cloth, a flask of water, a handful of polished stones for luck. He stoked the hearth one last time, its warmth lingering in the walls, and turned to the mole, who waited by the door, its vest of woven grass rustling faintly. With a nod, Balin opened the green-painted door, and they stepped out into the cool dawn, the clover beneath his boots sparkling with dew. The hills stretched wide and welcoming, their curves dotted with burrows where smoke curled from chimneys, and the air carried the scent of damp earth and wild mint. The mole scurried ahead, its twig tapping a rhythm on the ground, and Balin followed, his heart steady with the promise of the journey unfolding before him. The path led downward, winding past streams that gurgled like soft laughter and patches of flowers that nodded in the breeze. The mole moved with purpose, its tiny paws leaving faint trails in the soil, and Balin kept pace, his short legs sturdy against the gentle slopes. As they descended, the hills grew wilder, their grasses giving way to rocks smoothed by time and roots that twisted like old hands reaching for the sky. The light softened, filtered through a canopy of ancient trees that stood at the edge of a hollow Balin had never seen, a bowl of earth cradled by stone, its center a pool of water so still it mirrored the sky. The mole stopped at the pool's edge, its staff resting in the moss, and Balin knelt beside it, his beard brushing the ground as he gazed into the water. The surface rippled faintly, revealing a shimmer deep below, a glint of crystal, glowing like a captured star, nestled in the earth's embrace. Balin's breath caught, his hands tightening on his satchel, and the mole turned its bead-like eyes to him, its silence a gentle nudge. He felt the crystal's call, a hum that echoed his grandfather's tales, but the pool was deep, its waters dark beyond the shimmer, and the air around it tingled with a magic he could not name. The trees rustled above, their branches swaying as if to whisper encouragement, and Balin understood. This was only the beginning, a glimpse of the treasure he sought, guarded by the hill's quiet spirits. He dipped a hand into the pool, the water cool against his skin, and pulled back a single pebble, smooth and silver, its surface warm with a faint glow. The mole tapped its staff again, and Balin tucked the pebble into his satchel, a piece of the journey to carry with him. The sun climbed higher, bathing the hollow in a golden haze, and as the mole led him onward, Balin felt the hills wrap him in their gentle magic, a dwarf on a path to reclaim a light that had waited for him all along. The hollow hills shimmered under the midday sun as Balin followed the mole away from the pool, the silver pebble warm in his satchel and the crystal's faint glow lingering in his mind. The air was soft and sweet, scented with wildflowers and the earthy tang of moss, and the slopes rolled gently around them, their curves bathed in a golden light that made the clover sparkle like tiny stars. The mole moved steadily ahead, its twig staff tapping a rhythm against the stones, and Balin's stout legs carried him onward, his russet beard swaying with each step. The pool had shown him the treasure, a crystal pulsing with the mountain's light, but its depths hinted at secrets yet to unfold, and he felt a quiet thrill weave through his steady heart. The hills hummed softly, their magic brushing his skin, and he knew this journey was more than a tinker's quest. It was a call to mend something older, something tied to the land he loved. The path dipped lower, winding through a grove of hazel trees where the branches arched low, their leaves rustling like a chorus of whispers. The mole led him past burbling springs and patches of mushrooms that glowed faintly, their caps speckled with dew, until they reached a place where the earth opened wide, a cavern mouth framed by roots and stone, its darkness softened by a shimmer of light within. Balin paused, his ember eyes narrowing as he peered inside, and the mole tapped its staff once more, urging him forward. He adjusted his satchel, the pebble and bread a comforting weight, and stepped into the cavern, the cool air wrapping around him like a gentle hug. The walls glittered with flecks of quartz, catching the light of a lantern he pulled from his pack, a tinker's creation, its flame a steady gold that danced across the stone. Deeper in, the cavern widened into a chamber where the air hummed with a quiet song, and the floor was carpeted with moss that glowed faintly, like embers scattered across the earth. In the center stood a figure carved from stone, a dwarf, its beard long and curling, its hands cupped as if holding something precious. Balin's breath caught as he recognized the likeness of his grandfather, the lines of his face etched with a craftsman's care, and the mole scurried to the statue's base, its bead-like eyes glinting up at him. The statue's hands were empty, but a faint shimmer lingered there, a trace of the crystal's light, and Balin felt the pebble in his satchel pulse in response. He knelt, his stout form steady on the moss, and ran his fingers over the stone, the warmth of it seeping into his skin. The cavern seemed to sigh, the quartz twinkling brighter, and he understood. This was a marker, a memory of the treasure's keeper, guiding him closer to its resting place. The mole circled the statue, then darted toward a tunnel branching from the chamber, its twig tapping a path into the shadows. Balin rose, his lantern casting golden stars ahead, and followed, the moss softening his steps as the tunnel sloped downward. The air grew cooler, scented with damp stone and a hint of something sweet, like honey buried deep, and the walls narrowed, their quartz giving way to veins of silver that pulsed faintly. At the tunnel's end, they emerged into a hollow where a stream trickled through, its water catching the lantern's light in a dance of gold and blue. Above the stream hung a web of roots, thick and gnarled, and nestled within them glowed the crystal, larger than Balin had dreamed, its facets shimmering with a light that warmed the hollow like a hearth fire. His ember eyes widened, his heart lifting, but the roots held it tight, their tips glowing with a magic that whispered of guardianship. The mole stopped by the stream, its staff resting in the water, and Balin felt the hill's song grow stronger, a gentle challenge to prove his worth, a dwarf's tale unfolding in the quiet glow of the earth's embrace. The hollow beneath the hollow hills shimmered with the crystal's gentle light, its glow spilling across the stream and painting the roots in hues of amber and silver. Balin stood before it, his lantern resting on a stone by the water, its golden flame mingling with the crystal's radiance in a dance of warmth. The mole sat quietly beside him, its twig staff dipped in the stream, its bead-like eyes reflecting the light like tiny mirrors. The dwarf's russet beard brushed his chest as he gazed up at the treasure, his ember eyes wide with awe, and the pebble in his satchel pulsed softly, a heartbeat echoing the crystal's hum. The air was cool and still, scented with the damp richness of earth and the faint sweetness of hidden blooms, and the hills seemed to hold their breath, their magic curling around him like a tender embrace. Balin felt the weight of his grandfather's tale settle in his bones. This was the light of the mountains, the heart of the hollow hills, and it called to him with a quiet promise. He stepped closer, his stout boots sinking into the mossy bank, and reached a hand toward the roots, their gnarled forms twisting tighter as if to shield the crystal. The glow within them flared briefly, a soft warning, and Balin paused, his fingers hovering in the air. The roots were alive with the hill's spirit, guardians of the treasure, and he knew they would not yield it easily, not out of mistrust, but out of care for the land it sustained. The mole tapped its staff against the stream, sending ripples across the water, and Balin lowered his hand, his heart steady with understanding. This was no prize to be taken by force, but a gift to be earned, a test of the kindness and craft that defined him. He knelt by the water, the lantern's light spilling over his shoulders, and opened his satchel, pulling out the silver pebble and a small tinker's tool, a hammer no bigger than his thumb, its handle worn smooth by years of use. The dwarf held the pebble to the stream, letting its glow catch the crystal's light, and tapped it gently with the hammer, a soft chime ringing through the hollow. The sound wove into the hill's hum, a melody of metal and stone, and the roots shivered, their tips softening as if listening. Balin worked slowly, his hands steady as he shaped the pebble, carving it into a tiny lantern that mirrored the one he carried, a delicate thing, its sides pierced with star-shaped holes. He set it in the water, and it floated, its glow brightening as the stream carried it toward the roots. The guardians swayed, their light pulsing in time with the lantern's shimmer, and Balin felt a warmth spread through the hollow, a quiet approval from the earth. The roots parted slightly, revealing more of the crystal, its facets catching the light in a dance of silver and gold, and the mole scurried closer, its vest rustling as it watched. Balin rose, his ember eyes glinting with hope, and placed his tinker's lantern beside the stream, its flame flickering as if in greeting to its smaller twin. The roots loosened further, their glow softening, and the crystal's light spilled freer, bathing the hollow in a radiance that felt like the first breath of dawn. The dwarf understood. This was his proof, a craftsman's offering, a piece of his heart given to the hills. The mole tapped its staff once more, and the stream rippled, the tiny lantern drifting back to Balin's feet, now aglow with a piece of the crystal's magic. He lifted it gently, its warmth seeping into his hands, and the roots stilled, their guardianship eased but not yet ended. The hollow hummed with a gentle song, the hills whispering their trust, and Balin knew he was close, close to claiming the treasure, close to mending the light that had dimmed, a dwarf's journey unfolding in the tender glow of the earth's quiet magic. The hollow beneath the hollow hills glowed with a tender warmth as Balin held the tiny lantern, its star-shaped light pulsing with a fragment of the crystal's magic. The stream trickled softly, its waters catching the shimmer of his offering, and the roots above the crystal swayed gently, their gnarled forms loosened but still cradling the treasure in their embrace. The mole sat by the water's edge, its twig staff resting in the moss, its bead-like eyes glinting with a quiet pride that mirrored the flicker in Balin's ember eyes. His russet beard brushed the lantern as he turned it in his hands, its glow a piece of the hill's heart, and the air hummed with a melody of stone and root, wrapping him in a cozy stillness. The dwarf felt the weight of his journey settle into a steady hope. The roots had accepted his craft, but their guardianship lingered, a final step yet to be taken in this gentle tale of light and trust. Balin set the tiny lantern beside its larger twin, their flames dancing together in a golden harmony, and knelt by the stream once more, his stout form steady on the mossy bank. The crystal's radiance spilled through the roots, painting the hollow in hues of silver and amber, and he gazed up at it, his heart tugging with a memory of his grandfather's voice, the tales of a treasure that kept the hills alive, a light that belonged to all who called them home. He reached into his satchel, pulling out the bread wrapped in cloth, and broke it into small pieces, scattering them into the stream. The water carried them toward the roots, a simple gift from a tinker's hands, and the mole tapped its staff, sending ripples that nudged the crumbs closer. The roots shivered, their glow softening, and Balin felt the hills sigh, a whisper of gratitude threading through the air. The dwarf rose, his hands empty now but his spirit full, and stepped back, letting the lantern's light spill across the hollow. The roots began to part, their tips curling upward like petals unfolding, and the crystal gleamed brighter, its facets catching the golden flames in a dance of warmth and wonder. The mole scurried to Balin's side, its vest rustling as it leaned on its staff, and together they watched as the roots released their hold, the crystal hovering briefly before settling onto the moss below. It was larger than Balin had imagined, a star of stone and light, its glow pulsing with the heartbeat of the hills, and he felt a tear prick his ember eyes, a quiet joy at seeing his grandfather's treasure at last. The hollow trembled faintly, the stream rippling with a song, and the crystal's light spread, seeping into the walls and floor, a radiance that promised renewal. Balin approached slowly, his boots sinking into the moss, and lifted the crystal with both hands, its warmth flowing through him like a river of sunlight. The mole tapped its staff one final time, and the hollow sighed, its magic settling into a gentle peace. The dwarf cradled the treasure close, its glow blending with the lantern's flames, and felt the hill's spirit wrap around him, a blessing, a trust earned through kindness and craft. The roots above stilled, their task complete, and the air grew sweeter, scented with the promise of blooming flowers and thriving streams. Balin turned to the mole, his russet beard curling with a smile, and the tiny creature nodded, its bead-like eyes bright with a shared triumph. The journey was not yet over. The crystal belonged to the hills, and he must bring its light back to the surface. But for now he rested in the hollow's glow, the treasure in his hands, a dwarf's heart alight with the magic of the earth's tender embrace. The hollow beneath the hollow hills shimmered with a gentle radiance as Balin held the crystal, its star-like glow pulsing warmly in his hands. The stream trickled past, its waters reflecting the light in ripples of silver and gold, and the moss beneath his boots glowed faintly, as if drinking in the treasure's magic. The mole stood beside him, its twig staff planted in the earth, its bead-like eyes glinting with a quiet contentment that matched the flicker in Balin's ember eyes. The tiny lanterns, one crafted from the pebble, the other from his tinker's pack, burned steadily by the water, their flames casting golden stars across the chamber, and the air hummed with a melody of gratitude, soft and soothing like a lullaby sung by the hills themselves. Balin's russet beard brushed the crystal as he cradled it, his stout form steady in the glow, and he felt the weight of his journey shift, a treasure found, a promise kept, but a task yet to finish, to carry this light back to the hollow hills above. He knelt by the stream, the crystal warm against his chest, and tucked it gently into his satchel, its glow seeping through the cloth like a hidden sun. The mole tapped its staff, sending a ripple through the water, and Balin gathered the lanterns, their light a comforting pair in the dimness. The roots above hung still, their guardianship ended, and the hollow seemed to sigh, its walls glittering with quartz as if bidding him farewell. He rose, his short legs firm on the moss, and followed the mole back through the tunnel, the silver veins in the walls pulsing faintly as they passed. The air grew lighter, scented with the freshness of the hills, and the path sloped upward, the sound of trickling water fading into a distant murmur. The mole scurried ahead, its vest of woven grass rustling, and Balin's heart lifted with each step, the crystal's warmth a steady companion against his side. The tunnel opened into the cavern where the stone dwarf stood, its carved hands still cupped as if waiting. Balin paused, his lantern casting a golden glow over his grandfather's likeness, and felt a quiet pang of pride. The tales had led him here, through craft and kindness, to reclaim what was lost. He set the tiny lantern in the statue's hands, its star-shaped light flickering like a gift returned, and the chamber hummed, the moss beneath the statue brightening with a soft shimmer. The mole waited by the cavern mouth, its twig tapping the stone, and Balin smiled, his russet beard curling as he stepped out into the grove of hazel trees. The afternoon sun filtered through the branches, painting the ground in dappled gold, and the hills stretched wide and welcoming, their slopes alive with the rustle of clover and the dance of fireflies waking early in the shade. Balin breathed deeply, the scent of wild mint and warm earth filling his lungs, and felt the crystal's glow stir in his satchel, a coal to share its light with the hills above. The mole led him upward, past springs that bubbled with renewed vigor and flowers that turned their faces to the sun, their petals faintly aglow. As they neared the surface, the burrows of the hollow hills came into view, smoke curling from chimneys and the distant sound of laughter drifting on the breeze. Balin's green-painted door gleamed in the sunlight, a beacon of home, but he paused on a rise overlooking the slopes, the crystal's hum urging him to act. He lifted it from his satchel, its facets catching the sun in a burst of silver and gold, and held it high, its light sweeping across the hills like a wave of dawn. The clover sparkled brighter, the streams sang clearer, and a warmth spread through the earth, waking the land from its quiet dimness. The mole tapped its staff one last time, and Balin knew the hills were whole again, their magic restored by a dwarf's gentle hands, a treasure shared in the soft glow of day. The hollow hills basked in the crystal's glow as Balin stood on the rise, its light spilling across the slopes in a gentle tide of silver and gold. The clover beneath his boots shimmered like a sea of stars, and the flowers dotting the hills lifted their petals, their faint radiance renewed under the sun's warm gaze. The mole sat beside him, its twig staff resting in the grass, its bead-like eyes reflecting the treasure's shine, and Balin's russet beard curled with a quiet smile as he lowered the crystal, its warmth pulsing softly in his hands. The air carried the scent of fresh earth and blooming wildflowers, and the streams weaving through the valleys sang a melody that danced with the breeze. The burrows below stirred with life, dwarves peeking from their doors, their faces bright with wonder as the hills awoke around them, and Balin felt a tender pride settle in his chest, a tinker's work, a grandfather's dream, brought to life in the glow of this moment. He tucked the crystal back into his satchel, its light seeping through the cloth like a hidden ember, and turned to the mole, its vest of woven grass fluttering as it rose to its paws. Together they descended the rise, the grass soft beneath Balin's stout boots, and the hills seemed to hum a welcome, their magic threading through the earth in quiet harmony. The mole led him past burrows where children laughed and darted among the clover, their voices a gentle chorus, and past streams where the water sparkled clearer than ever before. Balin's green-painted door came into view, its mossy frame aglow in the afternoon light, and he paused at the threshold, the crystals hum a steady song against his side. The mole tapped its staff once, a soft farewell, and scurried off into the grass, its tiny form vanishing among the slopes, leaving Balin with a warmth that lingered like a friend's parting smile. Inside his hollow, the hearth flickered with a golden flame, its light blending with the crystal's glow as Balin stepped through the door. The air smelled of cinnamon and sage, the kettle simmering softly, and the shelves of jars and stones gleamed as if polished by the hill's renewal. He set his satchel on the table, the crystal spilling out with a shimmer that bathed the room in silver and gold, and settled into his chair, his ember eyes tracing its facets. The music box he had been mending sat unfinished, its chime waiting to be restored, and Balin reached for it, his tinker's hands steady with purpose. He worked slowly, weaving the crystal's light into his craft, and soon the box sang again, a lullaby that echoed the hill's melody, its notes soft and soothing, a gift born from the journey he had taken. The hollow filled with the sound, wrapping him in a cozy embrace, and he felt the hill's gratitude seep through the walls, a quiet thanks for the light returned. As dusk crept over the hollow hills, painting the sky in shades of lavender and rose, Balin stepped outside, the crystal in one hand, the music box in the other. The fireflies danced above the streams, their glow brighter now, and the flowers shimmered with a radiance that promised thriving days ahead. He placed the crystal atop a stone by his door, its light spilling across the slope, a beacon for the hills to share, and set the music box beside it, its chime drifting on the breeze. The dwarves gathered near, their faces warm with smiles, and Balin joined them, his stout form blending into the circle as the night wrapped them in its gentle hush. The crystal glowed steady and true, a heart restored to the hollow hills, and Balin's ember eyes twinkled with a peace he had longed for, a dwarf's tale nearing its tender close in the glow of a land made whole. The night draped the hollow hills in a soft velvet cloak as Balin stood among his kin, the crystal's silver and gold glow casting a gentle light across their faces. The music box chimed its lullaby beside the stone, its notes weaving through the air like threads of a dream, and the dwarves gathered close, their burrows aglow with lantern light that flickered in harmony with the treasure. The slopes shimmered with clover and flowers, their radiance a quiet song of renewal, and the streams murmured sweetly, their waters reflecting the stars that bloomed above. Balin's russet beard brushed his chest as he gazed at the crystal, its warmth a steady pulse in the cool evening, and his ember eyes glowed with a contentment that settled deep in his bones. The hills hummed around them, a melody of earth and magic, and the air carried the scent of wild mint and warm stone, wrapping the night in a cozy embrace. The dwarves lingered by the stone, their voices soft as they shared tales of the hill's older days, stories of blooming meadows and thriving burrows, now alive again under the crystal's light. Balin listened, his stout form steady among them, and felt the echo of his grandfather's voice in their words, a legacy woven into the land he had helped restore. A child approached, her hands clutching a tiny flower that glowed faintly, and placed it beside the crystal, its petals curling in the light like a thank you from the hills. Balin smiled, his beard curling, and the dwarves joined in, their laughter a gentle ripple that danced with the music box's tune. The fireflies gathered overhead, their glow brighter than ever, and the night seemed to sigh, a tender peace settling over the slopes as the crystal's magic seeped into every root and stone. As the stars climbed higher, Balin stepped back to his green-painted door, the crystal and music box left to shine for all. He entered his hollow, the hearth crackling with a golden flame, and the air greeted him with the familiar scent of cinnamon and sage. The shelves gleamed, the jars of herbs and polished stones catching the firelight, and he settled into his chair, his satchel resting empty on the table. The hill's hum drifted through the walls, a quiet lullaby that blended with the hearth's glow, and Balin's hands found a new piece of wood, his tinker's spirit stirring once more. He carved slowly, shaping a small bird that would sing when wound, its wings etched with stars, a gift for the days ahead. The hollow wrapped him in its warmth, the firelight dancing across his russet beard, and he felt the treasure's light beyond his door, a heart shared with the hills he called home. Morning broke over the hollow hills with a golden calm, the sun spilling its rays across the slopes in a wash of light that mingled with the crystal's glow. The dwarves woke to a land renewed, their burrows bustling with life, the clover sparkling and the flowers blooming vivid under the day's embrace. Balin stepped outside, His bird finished and chirping softly in his hands, and placed it beside the crystal, its song joining the music box in a duet of joy. The hills flourished under his care, the stream singing strong and the fireflies dancing even in daylight, a quiet magic threading through the earth. Balin's ember eyes twinkled as he watched the children play among the slopes, their laughter a melody of the future, and he knew his journey had ended where it belonged, in the heart of the hollow hills, a dwarf's tale closed with a treasure restored and a land alight with peace, resting forever in the gentle glow of a happy dawn.